an article from 2019 titled "Horseshoe Crabs Are Drained for Their Blue Blood" sent me reeling. At first I thought it was fake, but a quick search showed me that it certainly wasn't. So firstly, the blue blood itself. Horseshoe crabs use hemocyanin to carry oxygen through their blood. Because of the copper present in hemocyanin, their blood is blue. Secondly, the reason this blood is so valuable. In a nutshell, it is used for medical purposes and is especially vital in vaccines. Unlike the blood of vertebrates, horseshoe crabs do not use hemoglobin to transport oxygen throughout their body. Instead, they use hemocyanin, a chemical that contains copper, thus giving their blood that distinctive blue color. But this isn't what makes their blood so valuable. Instead, it's the kind of immune cells that they carry. Vertebrates carry white blood cells in their bloodstreams. Invertebrates, like the horseshoe crab, carry amoebocytes instead. These amoebocytes have a special clotting agent that detects a contaminant called endotoxin. And this was noticed in 1956 by a medical researcher, Fred Bang. The amoebocytes, part of the crab's ancient immune system, were used to make a concoction called limulus amoebocyte lysate, or LAL. Before LAL, scientists had no easy way of knowing whether a vaccine or medical tool was contaminated with bacteria like E. coli or Salmonella. Scientists would inject vaccines into huge number of rabbits and then basically wait for symptoms to show up. But when LAL was approved for use in 1970, it was a game changer. Drop a minuscule amount of it onto a medical device or vaccine, and the LAL will encase any gram-negative bacteria in a jelly cocoon. While it can't kill the bacteria, the jelly seal is like a fire alarm, alerting us to the presence of what could become a potentially lethal infection and prevent it from spreading. If even tiny amounts of endotoxin, a type of bacterial toxin, make their way into vaccines, intravenous drugs, insulin, or any other sterile implantable medical devices, such as artificial knees and hips, the results can be deadly. And ever since, around May of each year, as horseshoe crabs ascend on beaches to mate and spawn, pharmaceutical companies round up 500,000 of them, take them to specialized labs along the US East Coast, where technicians extract the blood from a vein near their heart, essentially bleeding them half to death, and then return them to the ocean, after which many will die. It's a surreal and, quite frankly, macabre practice. Up to 30% of the crabs don't live through the bleeding process. The survivors are returned to the water, but no one really knows how well or even if they recover. In 2016, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature bumped the American horseshoe crab up to vulnerable on its red list, one step below endangered. LAL Labs claim that the returned crabs eventually recover, but new evidence suggests that's not always the case. Commercial demand from horseshoe crab blood has brought the future of this enduring species into question. Trust us to almost extinguish a species that has been around even longer than the dinosaurs. Yay us. Regulators and environmentalists are concerned that current trends and overfishing of this marine arthropod will significantly impact the surrounding ecosystem. Ultimately, healthy populations of horseshoe crabs are vital to restoring and maintaining ecosystems while balancing the need for medical and research applications entirely dependent on these unique creatures. Commonly referred to as a living fossil, the horseshoe crab has been able to survive nearly unchanged for an estimated 200 million years prior to recent population dynamics in the face of growing commercial demand. Maybe they have gotten away with this for so long without people going up in arms because, well, let's face it, I don't think anybody is rushing to cuddle these fierce-looking creatures. But stick with me here, and maybe you will actually get to like them in some way. I did. In fact, I would go as far as to say that I became very fond of these majestic creatures. There is an extensive study on their survival, so if you're interested in reading this, I have provided the link below. Let me tell you a little bit about these creatures. It has unique blue blood that can detect bacteria. They are an ancient species. Horseshoe crabs are sometimes called living fossils because they've been around in some form for more than 450 million years. The Atlantic horseshoe crab has not changed in over 230 million years. So this species was crawling around on the basin of the ocean during the time of the dinosaurs. They are full of misnomers. Their popular name is the first misnomer, as they're not true crabs, nor even crustaceans, as crabs are, but a different order of arthropod. Despite their name, these creatures are more closely related to spiders and scorpions than crabs. The second misnomer is its appearance. Despite its angry appearance, intimidating spike tail, and creepy set of legs and pinchers, the horseshoe crab is one of the friendliest marine animals you can stumble upon, and it will not hurt you at all. Horseshoe crabs do not bite or sting because they have no stinger, no fangs, and no teeth. Despite the ferocious look of the tail and the bad reputation it has created, it isn't venomous or even used as a weapon. It is actually used as a rudder. The third misnomer is that if a horseshoe crab gets stuck on its back, it can always flip itself back over by using its tail. Now, I actually can't find any concrete information on this, and what I am getting is slightly conflicting. But from what I have seen and read, it appears to be easier for them to right themselves when they're in water. But on land, they can run into trouble sometimes. So if you're ever walking down the beach and you see a horseshoe crab that's flipped on its back, what you're supposed to do is just gently grab the carapace and flip it right up. You don't want to pick it up by its tail, not because it's venomous, but because you can actually injure the animal and even break off its tail. Have no fear when it comes to picking this animal up. It won't hurt you in any way. I actually find it strange that most articles will say that you should never pick them up by the tail, because, to be honest, I can't imagine anyone wanting to do that, especially because of the misnomer that the tail is venomous. I mean, you're not going to grab a scorpion by its pincers, are you? Horseshoe crabs are closely related to the extinct sea scorpions, which include some of the largest arthropods to have ever existed, and the two may be sister groups. They are sexually dimorphic. Females are about 20 to 30% larger than males and can reach 2 feet in length. Natural breeding of horseshoe crabs in captivity has proven to be difficult. Some evidence indicates that mating takes place only in the presence of the sand or mud in which the horseshoe crab's eggs were hatched. It is not known with certainty what is in the sand that the crabs can sense or how they sense it. Lost legs or the tail may slowly regenerate, and cracks in the body shell can heal itself. It has 10 eyes. It has 2 compound lateral eyes, each composed of about 1,000 ommatidia, plus a pair of median eyes that are able to detect both visible light and ultraviolet light, a single endoparietal eye, and a pair of rudimentary lateral eyes on the top. The latter become functional just before the embryo hatches. Also, a pair of ventral eyes is located near the mouth, as well as a cluster of photoreceptors on the telson. Despite having so many eyes, the horseshoe crab has relatively poor eyesight. Having said that, research on the amazing and complex compound eyes of horseshoe crabs has led to a better understanding of human vision. For reasons not entirely understood, horseshoe crabs are only found around the eastern coasts of North America and Asia. They have primitive gills that allow them to remain out of water for up to 4 days. Crabs stranded on the beach during spawning bury themselves in the sand or fold themselves in half to conserve water until the tide rises again. Basically, each year, these creatures gather for a mass orgy, and while their pants are down, they get snapped up by our pharma companies. During the late spring and early summer, adult horseshoe crabs travel from deep ocean waters to beaches along the east and Gulf coasts to breed. The males arrive first and wait for the females. When the females come to shore, they release natural chemicals called pheromones that attract the males and send a signal that it's time to mate. Horseshoe crabs prefer to breed at night during high tides and new and full moons. The males grasp onto the females, and together they head to the shoreline. The female digs a hole in the sand and lays her eggs while the male fertilizes them. Often, several males surround the female and all fertilize together, which makes it easy to spot and count females, as they are generally the large center carapace surrounded by 3 to 5 smaller ones. The female can lay between 60,000 and 120,000 eggs in batches of a few thousand at a time. Horseshoe crab eggs are a food source for numerous birds, reptiles, and fish. Most horseshoe crabs will not even make it to the larval stage before being eaten. If the egg survives, the larval horseshoe crab will hatch from the egg after about 2 weeks or more. The larva looks like a tiny version of an adult horseshoe crab, but without a tail. Larval horseshoe crabs travel into the ocean water and settle on the sandy bottom of tidal flats for a year or more. As they develop, they will move into deeper waters and begin to eat more adult food. Over the next 10 years or so, the juvenile horseshoe crabs will molt and grow. The molting process requires shedding small exoskeletons in exchange for larger shells. Horseshoe crabs go through 16 or 17 molts during their development. At around 10 years of age, horseshoe crabs reach adulthood. They are ready to start breeding and will migrate to coastal beaches in the spring. A horseshoe crab can live for more than 20 years. The horseshoe crab is an arthropod species with a hard exoskeleton called the carapace, which is very sensitive to the world around it. It has 10 legs, which it uses for walking along the seafloor. The body of the crab is divided into 3 sections. The first section is the prosoma, or the head. The name horseshoe crab originates from the rounded shape of the head. It's the largest part of the body and contains much of the nervous and biological organs. The head has the brain, heart, mouth, nervous system, and glands, all protected by a large plate. The head also protects the largest set of eyes. Horseshoe crabs have 10 eyes scattered throughout the body and several more light receptors near the tail. The 2 largest eyes are primary compound eyes found on the prosoma and useful for finding mates. The other eyes and light receptors are useful for determining movement and changes in moonlight. The middle section of the body is the abdomen, or opisthothoma. It looks like a triangle with spines on the sides and a ridge in the center. The spines are movable and help protect the horseshoe crab. On the underside of the abdomen are muscles used for movement and gills for breathing and swimming. It's here that you see the resemblance to its cousins, scorpions and spiders. The third section, the horseshoe crab's spike-like tail, is called the telson, and although it looks intimidating, it is not dangerous, poisonous or used to sting. As in other arthropods, a true endoskeleton is absent, but the body does have an endoskeletal structure made up of cartilaginous plates that support the book gills. Despite existing for hundreds of millions of years, horseshoe crabs are nearly identical to their ancient relatives. This is because their body structure is extremely effective for survival. Think, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. These creatures have been saving our lives for years now, and I think it's time that we start repaying that, and maybe start saving theirs and just leaving them be. So, why are horseshoe crabs vital to the ecology of coastal communities? Their eggs are the major food source for shorebirds migrating north, including the federally threatened red knot. These shorebirds have evolved to time their migrations to coincide with peak horseshoe crab spawning activity, especially in the Delaware and Chesapeake Bay areas. Red knots and ruddy turnstones stop at Delaware Bay on their 9,000-mile journey from Chile to Arctic breeding grounds. These birds need tremendous amounts of energy for their long-distance flights, and calorie-rich horseshoe crab eggs are the perfect fuel. During their 2-week sojourn on Delaware Bay, red knots nearly double their body weight to prepare for and survive the final stretch of their journey to the frigid, unpredictable Canadian or Arctic tundra, which is often barren of further sustenance when they arrive. In the year 2020, however, cool temperatures delayed crab spawning, and only 30,000 red knots stayed in the bay, a drop from an estimated 40,000 birds in 2019. Conservationists caution that a weakening of one link in the food chain can reverberate with potentially disastrous consequences. You can no longer catch horseshoe crabs in Cape May, New Jersey, due to their importance to the threatened migratory red knot. These birds show up here in spring too. It is an ancient synchrony between species, one that began long before humans began harvesting these crabs for blood and will hopefully last long after. Sportfish that once were numerous, such as striped bass and flounder, have plummeted in number in the region, in part due to fewer horseshoe crab eggs. Diamondback terrapins, a type of reptile that's vulnerable to extinction, also depend on this seasonal buffet. The drop in these populations may also correlate to the overall decrease in the number of sea turtles in the Chesapeake Bay area over the past few decades. A synthetic alternative to crab lysate, recombinant factor, or CRFC, has been available since 2003, but so far, LAL is still required by the FDA for this type of testing. The companies had a number of reasons. There was only one supplier of the kit, a company that today is part of the Switzerland-based chemicals company Lonza. Pharmaceutical companies were wary of relying on a single source for such an important part of their manufacturing. What if something happened to Lonza, or a natural disaster hit its production plant. Companies that bleed crabs also stand to lose a lot of money if RFC becomes adopted widely. Of the 6 companies with crab bleeding facilities in the United States, 2 declined interviews, 1 did not respond to an interview request, and 2 have virtually no public presence. The 6th is Lonza, which currently sells both LAL and the alternative recombinant factor. Recently, however, a few things have changed the recent risk-reward calculus for pharmaceutical companies. For one, Lonza is no longer the sole supplier. In 2013, Hyglos became the second company to make RFC. In 2016, RFC was approved as an alternative in Europe, and a handful of US drug companies also began using it. But on June 1st, 2020, the American Pharmacopoeia, which sets the scientific standards for drugs and other products in the US, declined to place RFC on equal footing with crab lysate, claiming that its safety is still unproven. Swiss-based Lonza began manufacturing a COVID-19 vaccine for human clinical trials, and they had to use lysate in the vaccine as they planned to sell it in the US. So, if these animals really aren't recovering at the rate companies previously thought, we might eventually run out of crabs to bleed. If that happens, our lives and the lives of countless rabbits might be at risk. One thing I have learned through researching this is that these creatures are the friendliest creatures ever. I wouldn't exactly describe them as cute or even cuddly, but I have certainly developed a soft spot for them. Everything about the way they look screams danger to you, that they might bite, sting, pinch, slice you up, whatever. But actually, these creatures cannot hurt you and will not hurt you whatsoever. And I felt really sad that we are just taking these animals away from their habitat and basically bleeding them dry and then just discarding them back into the ocean to leave them to fend for themselves after we have made them weak. It's barbaric. Even their eggs are pretty amazing. They look like little gems. And they're my favorite color. The more I read about these, the more I developed an affinity for these alien-looking yet gentle ancient creatures. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you on my next video.